Cain Doyle, Mickey and Razor. Three names etched into Liverpool's darkest streets. Each one wielded power, fear and betrayal in a deadly game where loyalty was fragile and survival never guaranteed. This is the story of how their lives collided, sparking a brutal war that tore the city apart and revealed secrets no one expected. Liverpool in the early 2000s was a city struggling with its identity. Once known for its rich maritime history and cultural landmarks, it had become a place where the dark undercurrent of crime ran deep beneath the surface. In certain neighborhoods, an invisible force began to tighten its grip, a ruthless drug mafia that slowly but surely took control of the streets. It was a shadowy world, one where fear was the currency, and violence was the language everyone understood. The city's working-class districts, already battling poverty and neglect, became the perfect breeding ground for this new breed of crime. Young men, often without prospects or hope, were drawn into the promise of quick money and power. The drug trade flourished, spreading from the waterfront to council estates and busy market streets. Small-time dealers were swallowed up by larger, more dangerous operations that worked like well-oiled machines, distributing vast amounts of drugs across Liverpool and beyond. At the center of this new empire was a figure who would come to define the era, a man known only as the Ghost. Nobody really knew his real name or where he came from. He rarely showed himself in public, and even his closest associates feared him. What made him so dangerous wasn't just his ability to order killings or intimidate rivals. It was the way he controlled information and moved unseen, always a step ahead of the law. Stories circulated about his network of spies, corrupt officials, and informants embedded within the city's institutions. To many, the Ghost was more than a man, he was a force of nature, untouchable and unstoppable. This mysterious figure's influence stretched far beyond drug deals. Local businesses were coerced into paying protection money, and community events became stages for subtle threats. People who tried to speak out found themselves silenced, their lives turned upside down. The police faced constant pressure, but struggled to make headway against an enemy who seemed to vanish before they could catch him. The fear wasn't just of getting caught in the crossfire, it was the fear of what might happen if you were marked by the Mafia. Despite the growing violence, Liverpool's streets remained alive with a fierce spirit. People tried to carry on with their lives, holding on to normal routines and dreams. But beneath that surface, the city was changing. The drug mafia wasn't just a criminal organization, it was a dark shadow that infected every corner of the community, shaping the future of Liverpool in ways no one could have imagined. This was the beginning of a deadly chapter, a time when the city's underworld erupted into a war, unlike any before. Rival gangs clashed violently over territory, families were torn apart, and the balance of power was fragile. But amidst the chaos, the legend of the Ghost grew, and with it the sense that no one was truly safe from the deadly game unfolding in the streets of Liverpool. As the drug mafia's grip tightened on Liverpool, the city's streets began to change in ways that were impossible to ignore. Violence erupted with terrifying frequency, turning neighborhoods once familiar and safe into battlegrounds. Rival gangs, each desperate to control the most profitable drug routes, fought brutal turf wars that left a trail of destruction and despair. These clashes were not just about drugs, they were about power, respect, and survival. The violence was raw and unpredictable. Drive-by shootings became a regular occurrence, with innocent bystanders sometimes caught in the deadly crossfire. Bodies were found dumped in alleys, abandoned cars riddled with bullets left burning on the streets. The media reported each incident with grim headlines. But the stories didn't capture the full horror felt by those living through it. For families in the worst-hit areas, every day was a test of endurance, hope slipping further away with each new attack. The gangs involved in these wars were well-organized and ruthless. They operated with military-like precision, using intimidation and fear to control their territories. Young men were recruited and trained to carry out hits, enforce rules, and spy on rivals. Loyalty was demanded but easily broken, and betrayal was often met with deadly consequences. No one was safe, not even those who tried to stay out of the conflict. The police were caught in a difficult position. They were overwhelmed by the scale and ferocity of the violence, stretched thin across the city. Every arrest seemed to be met with a quick replacement, as other gang members stepped up to fill the void. Corruption within the force only added to the problem. Some officers were rumored to be on the Mafia's payroll, leaking information and obstructing investigations. This created a sense of hopelessness among residents who felt abandoned by the very people meant to protect them. The drug mafia's influence extended beyond the gangs themselves. Schools and community centers struggled to keep young people away from the allure of the drug trade. Many saw joining the gangs as the only way to earn respect or provide for their families. The streets became a training ground for violence. With children growing up surrounded by danger and betrayal, the cycle of crime and poverty seemed impossible to break. Despite the overwhelming darkness, there were moments of resilience. Local groups and individuals began to organize, trying to reclaim their neighborhoods from the grip of fear. They held meetings, set up watch programs, and worked with charities to offer alternatives for at-risk youth. But these efforts faced constant setbacks as the gangs retaliated fiercely against any challenge to their control. The war between Liverpool's rival drug factions was not just a battle over territory. It was a battle for the soul of the city. The bloodshed and fear left scars that went deep, affecting generations. As bodies piled up and lives were shattered, it became clear that this was only the beginning of a long and deadly struggle. Liverpool's streets were forever changed, caught in the grip of a ruthless conflict that showed no signs of ending anytime soon. Amid the chaos and bloodshed that gripped Liverpool's streets, a new figure began to emerge. Someone who seemed to operate beyond the reach of the law and rival gangs alike. His name was Cain Doyle, a man who quickly gained a reputation for being both cunning and brutal. Unlike the other gang leaders who were often reckless or flashy, Cain moved quietly but decisively, building his empire piece by piece while avoiding the mistakes that had brought others down. Cain's rise was unlike anything the city had seen before. He wasn't born into the criminal underworld but came from a modest background. It was said he learned early how to survive in the toughest parts of Liverpool, understanding the value of silence and patience. He avoided unnecessary violence unless it served a purpose, preferring to control through fear and respect rather than chaos. His style made him different and deadly. His enemies never knew when or how he would strike until it was too late. One of Cain's greatest strengths was his ability to surround himself with the right people. He recruited skilled enforcers, talented dealers and insiders, who had connections in the police and local government. This network became a shield, allowing Cain to expand his influence while staying out of the spotlight. Rumors spread that some officers turned a blind eye to his operations, and whispers of bribes and threats circulated in hushed conversations. To many, Cain Doyle appeared untouchable, a ghost who moved in plain sight. Under Cain's leadership, the drug trade in Liverpool grew into a highly organized and profitable enterprise. He established control over key drug routes, ensuring that his gang supplied the most desirable areas. Unlike the reckless gangs that fought openly in the streets, Cain's operations were efficient and low profile. He focused on maximizing profits and minimizing risk, a strategy that earned him loyal and fear in equal measure. However, Cain's rise did not go unchallenged. Rival factions saw him as a threat to their own power and began plotting ways to take him down. Yet every attempt to undermine him failed. Cain's intelligence network warned him in advance, and his enforcers acted swiftly to eliminate threats. His enemies found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned, deepening his reputation as someone who could not be crossed. Despite his ruthless methods, Cain managed to maintain a careful balance between violence and diplomacy. He negotiated deals when it suited him, and crushed opposition without hesitation when it did not. This combination of brains and brutality made him the most feared and respected figure in Liverpool's underworld. As Cain Doyle's empire grew, so did the mysteries surrounding him. No one knew where he truly came from or what his ultimate plan was, but one thing was clear: in the deadly game of Liverpool's gang wars, Cain was a player unlike any other, a man who seemed immune to the forces that destroyed so many before him. His rise marked a new chapter in the city's darkest story, one that would change everything. Cain Doyle's growing power was a direct challenge to the established gangs that had ruled Liverpool's drug trade for years. Among these rivals, one group stood out, a fierce faction known as the Ravens. They were hardened and ruthless, unwilling to back down from the fight for control of the city's most profitable streets. When Cain's crew began taking over key drug routes that once belonged to the Ravens, tensions quickly exploded into violent conflict. The turf wars that followed were savage and relentless. Streets that had once been familiar became battlegrounds where fear was constant and danger lurked around every corner. Gunshots shattered the night, and explosions rocked buildings, as each side tried to send a message. Both gangs used intimidation and brutal force, targeting not only rival members but also those suspected of helping the enemy. The violence wasn't limited to gang members. Innocent families and bystanders were caught in the crossfire, leaving the city reeling. The Ravens were known for their aggressive tactics. They refused to give ground, launching surprise attacks on Cain's drug operations and engaging in hit-and-run assaults. These clashes weren't just about territory, they were deeply personal, fueled by years of grudges and betrayals. The fighting became so intense that whole neighborhoods lived in fear, locking their doors early and avoiding the streets after dark. Many shops and local businesses suffered, as the constant threat of violence scared away customers. Cain Doyle, however, was not easily rattled. He responded to the Ravens' attacks with calculated precision, striking back hard but always with a purpose. His forces were well-trained and disciplined, carrying out targeted hits that weakened the rival faction's leadership. Cain avoided unnecessary bloodshed, focusing instead on breaking the Ravens' control over key areas and cutting off their supply chains. This tactical approach gave him the upper hand, even as the city around them descended into chaos. As the war dragged on, the lines between friend and foe blurred. Smaller gangs and independent dealers found themselves forced to choose sides or risk being wiped out. Some switched allegiances, while others were eliminated for refusing to take a stand. The instability spread beyond the gangs, affecting the wider community and overwhelming the local police, who struggled to keep up with the escalating violence. The media covered the conflict extensively, but the full scale of the destruction was only truly understood by those living in the worst-hit areas. Families were torn apart, and the constant fear left deep psychological scars. The war was not just about power, it was about survival. Every day was a struggle to stay alive in a city caught in the grip of a deadly gang war. Despite the brutality, neither side was ready to back down. The war between Cain Doyle's faction and the Ravens became a brutal, drawn-out conflict that reshaped Liverpool's criminal landscape. It was a battle that showed no signs of ending anytime soon, leaving the city caught in a violent storm from which it desperately hoped to emerge unbroken. As the violent turf wars between Cain Doyle's faction and the Ravens raged on, a complex web of hidden alliances and secret betrayals began to unravel beneath the surface. The chaos of open conflict masked a far more dangerous game, a game where trust was a rare commodity and loyalty could shift overnight. In the shadows, gang leaders forged unexpected partnerships, while others quietly sold out their closest allies for power or survival. The city's criminal underworld was no longer divided simply by gangs fighting for territory. Instead, it became a tangled network of shifting loyalties and backroom deals. Some smaller gangs, recognizing the strength of Cain Doyle, chose to align themselves with him, hoping to benefit from his growing empire. Others, fearful of Cain's power, joined forces with the Ravens in a desperate bid to challenge him. These alliances were fragile and often temporary, held together by convenience rather than genuine trust. Betrayal was a constant threat. Gang members were always watching their backs, knowing that a friend could turn into an enemy at any moment. Information was the most valuable weapon. Those who could gather intelligence on rivals had the upper hand. Spies and informants were everywhere, embedded not only within the gangs but also in the police force and local government. This created an atmosphere of paranoia where no one was safe from suspicion. One of the most dangerous elements in this hidden war was corruption within law enforcement. Some officers were rumored to have been paid off by the drug mafia, leaking sensitive information and sabotaging investigations. Others were accused of turning a blind eye to criminal activities in exchange for bribes or protection. This betrayal from within made it nearly impossible for the police to trust their own, and the people of Liverpool lost faith in those meant to protect them. The betrayals also reached into the gangs themselves. Ambitions and greed drove some members to make secret deals with rivals or the authorities, hoping to secure their own future. These double agents played both sides, feeding information that could lead to arrests or violent attacks. The risk of exposure was high, and when traitors were discovered, the consequences were often deadly. Despite the dangers, these hidden alliances and betrayals shaped the balance of power in Liverpool's underworld. Cain Doyle's empire survived not only because of his strength, but also due to his ability to navigate this dangerous web of relationships. He knew when to negotiate, when to intimidate, and when to eliminate threats quietly. This hidden layer of the gang wars was as deadly as the open violence on the streets. It showed that the battle for control was not just fought with guns, but with cunning, deception, and betrayal. In the world of Liverpool's drug mafia, the greatest danger often came not from enemies outside, but from those trusted most within. As the violence between rival gangs escalated and the death toll rose, pressure mounted on authorities to bring the chaos under control. National law enforcement agencies, recognizing that local police were struggling to contain the spiraling drug wars, launched a major crackdown on Liverpool's underworld. It was one of the largest operations the city had ever seen, with coordinated raids targeting suspected drug dens, gang hideouts, and was corruption within law enforcement. Some officers were rumored to have been paid off by the drug mafia, leaking sensitive information and sabotaging investigations. Others were accused of turning a blind eye to criminal activities in exchange for bribes or protection. This betrayal from within made it nearly impossible for the police to trust their own, and the people of Liverpool lost faith in those meant to protect them. The betrayals also reached into the gangs themselves. Ambitions and greed drove some members to make secret deals with rivals or the authorities, hoping to secure their own future. These double agents played both sides, feeding information that could lead to arrests or violent attacks. The risk of exposure was high, and when traitors were discovered, the consequences were often deadly. Despite the dangers, these hidden alliances and betrayals shaped the balance of power in Liverpool's underworld. Cain Doyle's empire survived not only because of his strength, but also due to his ability to navigate this dangerous web of relationships. He knew when to negotiate, when to intimidate, and when to eliminate threats quietly. This hidden layer of the gang wars was as deadly as the open violence on the streets. It showed that the battle for control was not just fought with guns, but with cunning, deception, and betrayal. In the world of Liverpool's drug mafia, the greatest danger often came not from enemies outside, but from those trusted most within. As the violence between rival gangs escalated and the death toll rose, pressure mounted on authorities to bring the chaos under control. National law enforcement agencies, recognizing that local police were struggling to contain the spiraling drug wars, launched a major crackdown on Liverpool's underworld. It was one of the largest operations the city had ever seen, with coordinated raids targeting suspected drug dens, gang hideouts, and known associates of the Mafia. The goal was clear: to disrupt the flow of drugs, arrest key figures, and restore some semblance of order. The raids were swift and often violent. Police officers stormed buildings with warrants, uncovering hidden caches of drugs, weapons, and cash. Many low-level dealers and gang members were arrested, sending a strong message that the city would no longer tolerate the lawlessness. These arrests brought temporary relief to neighborhoods long plagued by violence, and for a time, it seemed like the crackdown might finally weaken the powerful drug networks. However, amid this wave of enforcement, one name remained elusive: Cain Doyle. Despite the increased police presence and intelligence gathering, Cain managed to stay one step ahead of the law. His carefully constructed network of lookouts and informants warned him of impending raids, allowing him to disappear before officers arrived. His operations adapted quickly, shifting locations and using secret codes to communicate. While many gang members were caught in the dragnet, Cain's core team remained intact. Rumors began to spread that Cain had struck a secret deal with someone high up in the system, someone who could protect him from arrest and prosecution. Whispers of corruption and collusion surfaced, deepening the sense of frustration among police officers who felt their efforts were being undermined. Some believed that certain officials were accepting bribes or favors in exchange for information, allowing Cain to continue operating with near immunity. This shadowy protection added a new layer of complexity to the crackdown. The public saw the arrests and applauded the police efforts, but beneath the surface, the drug mafia's power was not fully broken. The arrests primarily hit lower-ranking members, while the leadership continued to pull strings from the shadows. It became clear that dismantling the drug network would require more than just raids. It would demand uncovering the corruption that shielded them. At the same time, tensions within the gangs grew. The crackdown unsettled the fragile balance of power, causing suspicion and fear to spread among members. Some began to question their loyalty, wondering who might betray them to save themselves. The constant threat of arrest and violence created an atmosphere of paranoia and mistrust. Despite the setbacks, law enforcement vowed to press on. New strategies were developed, including undercover operations and increased surveillance aimed at cutting off Cain Doyle's protection and exposing the hidden networks that allowed him to thrive. The crackdown was just one chapter in a long and difficult fight, but it marked a turning point, showing that the drug mafia's reign, while powerful, was not invincible. The city of Liverpool was beginning to fight back, determined to reclaim its streets from the grip of fear and crime. The turning point in Liverpool's deadly gang wars came unexpectedly, shaking the drug mafia to its core. Cain Doyle, the untouchable kingpin, had managed to evade the law for years, protected by his network of informants and corrupt officials. But that all changed when his closest lieutenant, a man known simply as Mickey, made a choice that no one saw coming. Mickey's betrayal sent shockwaves through the underworld and set off a chain of events that would alter the city's criminal landscape forever. Mickey had been with Cain from the beginning, trusted, loyal, and deeply involved in the day-to-day operations of the drug empire. He knew the inner workings of the organization better than anyone else, and held crucial information about Cain's movements, contacts, and hidden safe houses. But beneath the surface, tensions had been simmering. Fear of arrest, personal ambition, and a growing distrust of Cain's increasingly ruthless leadership drove Mickey to a dangerous decision. He handed over vital evidence to the police. This betrayal was more than just a leak. It was a calculated move that exposed Cain's entire operation. The evidence Mickey provided included detailed records of drug shipments, names of corrupt officials, and plans for future deals. It painted a vivid picture of the mafia's reach and methods, offering the police the breakthrough they desperately needed. With this information, law enforcement launched a series of well-coordinated raids, targeting Cain's network with precision and speed. Cain Doyle's arrest came in the dead of night, caught off guard by the sudden police operation. The shock was felt not only by his crew but across Liverpool's criminal underworld. For years, Cain had been seen as untouchable, a ghost who moved freely and struck without warning. Now he was behind bars, facing charges that could end his reign permanently. The fallout from Mickey's betrayal was immediate and violent. Many of Cain's former allies saw the betrayal as a sign of weakness and scrambled to claim parts of his empire for themselves. Rival gangs attempted to exploit the power vacuum, leading to renewed violence and chaos on the streets. Meanwhile, Cain's loyalists hunted Mickey relentlessly, seeking revenge for the ultimate betrayal. His fate became a grim warning to others who might consider turning their backs on the mafia. For the police, Mickey's cooperation was a breakthrough, but also a reminder of how fragile trust was in this dangerous world. His betrayal exposed the hidden vulnerabilities of the drug mafia and revealed just how close law enforcement had come to breaking its hold on Liverpool. It also opened the door to uncovering deeper corruption within the city's institutions, as many officials linked to Cain's network were now exposed. The arrest of Cain Doyle marked a turning point in Liverpool's battle against its drug mafia. It showed that even the most powerful figures could fall, and that betrayal, while deadly, was sometimes the only way to bring down a system built on fear and silence. But as the city celebrated this victory, the question remained: who would rise next to fill the void Cain left behind? The deadly game was far from over. Cain Doyle's arrest sent shockwaves through Liverpool. But the true impact came during his trial, when a flood of secrets spilled into the open. For the first time, the city saw beyond the street-level violence and drug deals to the deeper corruption and deception that had allowed the drug mafia to thrive. What emerged was a tangled web, involving not just gangsters but also figures from inside the very institutions meant to keep the city safe. During the courtroom proceedings, evidence revealed connections between Cain's operation and several police officers who had accepted bribes or provided sensitive information to the mafia. These corrupt officers had acted as gatekeepers, warning Cain of raids and tipping him off about investigations. Their involvement showed how deeply the drug trade had penetrated law enforcement, undermining efforts to bring criminals to justice. But the corruption didn't stop there. Testimonies uncovered links between the drug mafia and local politicians, some of whom had turned a blind eye to the violence or used their influence to protect key players in exchange for favors or money. This network of deceit extended into businesses that laundered drug money, allowing the mafia to legitimize its profits and continue operations under the radar. Perhaps the most shocking revelation was the identity of the Ghost, the mysterious figure who had ruled Liverpool's underworld with fear and silence. Far from being a myth or an unknown gang leader, the Ghost was uncovered as a high-ranking official within law enforcement itself, a man who had manipulated both sides of the conflict for personal gain. His dual role gave the mafia an almost unbeatable advantage, allowing them to evade capture while controlling rival gangs. The trial exposed how this hidden power structure operated like a shadow government, influencing decisions and protecting the drug trade from disruption. It explained how Cain Doyle had managed to evade arrest for so long, and why previous crackdowns had failed to make a lasting impact. The public, already shaken by the scale of violence, now faced the unsettling truth that the corruption was woven into the fabric of the city's institutions. The revelation sparked outrage and demands for reform. Police departments launched internal investigations, and several officers were suspended or charged with misconduct. Local government promised changes to restore trust, but the damage was deep, and many residents remained skeptical. The trial showed that breaking the drug mafia's hold on Liverpool required more than arrests. It meant confronting the corruption that had allowed it to flourish. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the city watched closely, realizing that the battle against the drug mafia was as much about cleaning up the system as it was about fighting gangs. The exposure of the Ghost and the corrupt officials marked a turning point, one that challenged Liverpool to face its darkest truths and work toward rebuilding a safer, more just future. But it also served as a warning. The fight against crime was not just about enemies outside, but enemies within. With Cain Doyle behind bars and the shocking truth about the Ghost finally revealed, Liverpool's underworld seemed vulnerable, yet the city was far from free of danger. The power vacuum left by Cain's fall ignited fierce competition among rival gangs eager to seize control of the drug trade. What followed was a new wave of violence, even more unpredictable and ruthless than before, as former allies turned enemies and new players emerged from the shadows. The streets, already scarred from years of conflict, once again became a battleground. Without a strong leader to enforce order, chaos spread rapidly. Gangs fought not only for territory but for survival, knowing that any mistake could cost them everything. The fragile alliances that had kept some peace dissolved quickly, replaced by bitter grudges and bitter betrayals. In this turbulent atmosphere, trust became almost impossible, and violence escalated at an alarming rate. Among those trying to rise to power was a figure known only as Razor, a cold and calculating individual who thrived in the disorder. Razor was different from Cain, more brutal, less strategic, and willing to use terror as a weapon to intimidate